One thing I often get asked about is how I make my labels for my raw materials. So if you watch some of my videos, you'll probably notice that I pre-dilute all of my perfumery raw materials, and each of those pre-dilutions, they don't just have a handwritten label with the name of the raw materials scrawled all over it, but they actually have these quite nice looking custom labels. So in this video, I'm going to go through exactly how I make those labels, so if you want to do something similar yourself, then you'll have a good idea of one way you can do it. So first things first, do I actually need to make labels? And I say this because while it's nice to have nice looking labels, it's not strictly necessary for most people. And that is really because it's quite high effort. So you can just go and get sticky labels and handwrite the names of the raw materials. And for most people, that's going to be the quickest way to do things and save you a lot of time. So for me personally then, why is it worth making labels like this? Well, one of the things is I simply like things to look quite clean and aesthetically pleasing. For me, it really clears my mind, especially having legible, clear, easy to read labels that feel nice. That clears my mind to be creative, and I think it allows me to focus on the creativity and the perfume making side of things itself. For me, if I just written labels by hand, especially given that my handwriting isn't the best, I would actually be having to spend more of my brain power trying to process the text on each bottle and looking for things. But as it stands, because I've got this nice uniform labeling system, it's very quick and easy for me to glance at hundreds of bottles and quickly pick out the one exact thing that I'm looking for. Another reason is it also just makes things look nice and professional for my business, which I think can be quite valuable, especially if clients or other people are seeing your bottles. But again, most people don't necessarily have to worry about this. So if you go and make these labels for yourself, I really think it's a bit up to you and your reasoning and how your brain functions. If you're someone who likes everything very organized, neat and tidy, then I do recommend maybe trying it out. But if that's something that doesn't bother you, then really there's no reason not to just make simple labels that are handwritten. So then how do I do it? Well, firstly, I gather together the information for the raw materials, and namely on my bottle labels, apart from the logo of the brand, I have 3 pieces of information. That is the name of the raw material as the main heading. Then for different raw materials, I have a different subheading. So for synthetics, I put the CAS number, which is a chemical identification number. For naturals, I like to put the botanical name of the plant for which it came from. And for bases, so those kind of pre-made blends or accords, those are a bit rarer, but for those I usually just like to put the company name that they were made by. Then for synthetics, I also have a third piece of information, which is an image of the molecular structure. Now, I like to do that because I've got a background in chemistry, but it's not necessarily something that everyone would want to do. Conversely, if you had a different background, then you might think of doing something else. For example, you might like to put an image of what the smell reminds you of. If you are interested in having a molecule image yourself, what I do is I draw mine in a software called ChemDraw. Though if you don't have that or you don't know how to use that software, then you can always just go and find an image online and go and paste it in. So the actual labels themselves, how do I design them? Well, I made a template on the Adobe InDesign software. So if you use Adobe Suite for other things, for example, a lot of people use Photoshop, then you might have InDesign. And I like to use that software because it's good for kind of typesetting, laying out images and text into a publication. And what I use is a printable A4 sheet of paper. And the reason for that is because, like many people, I have an A4 printer at home. So online you can buy these pre-cut labels which are arranged on A4 sheets. So you can put these into your regular inkjet printer and then print on top of them. So for the template, I laid it out and took the measurements of the labels, and then I put text boxes and placeholders into where I want that text to be. So if you're doing this yourself, you could go and make your own template. Then what I do is I take my information and I go and paste that into the template for the labels, and then simply go and print it out. For the layout on my sheets of labels, there are 9 rows and 3 columns. So what I like to do is do one sheet for 9 different raw material pre-dilutions, where I have each of the rows being a different raw material, and then I have a different column for each dilution. So usually I'll make a 10% dilution of the raw material straight away, and that will be my main working dilution. But I'll also go and make a 1% dilution at some point in time. So if I print these at the time of making the first one, then the label's ready to go when I need it to go and make that second dilution. I also usually do a 0.1% dilution for very strong raw materials. So I also go and paste an 0.1% label in the third column in the small chance that I will need to go and make that. Once I've gone and printed the labels, before putting them on the bottles, I actually have another label which I stick over the top. And those are these clear plastic labels which are exactly the same size as the printable labels, and I like to put these over the top of the printed labels, and that's because they firstly add a nice shiny surface finish, but they also do help a bit with waterproofing and smudge proofing the label, which means you can keep handling the bottle and touching it, or even get spills on it and it will stop the label getting ruined. That said, liquids can still leak into the sides of these, so they're not completely foolproof, but I've found when some liquid does spill down the side of the bottle, in all cases, the label over the top has protected the ink from smudging, and usually the liquid actually just evaporates and dries out anyway, meaning that it does seem to be a pretty good solution for protecting. So then all you do is simply take the label and stick it over the bottle. I think it's quite important to make sure that the labels are aligned, so once you stick it down, you don't have to try to kind of unpick it and change it. It's something you learn over time to be quite good at. Then after that, I also like to make little labels for the top. So again, the process is very similar. In this case, I take my template. This top label template I've actually got on Adobe Illustrator, but you could have done it in Adobe InDesign. And of course, if you don't have the Adobe software, you can do all of these templates in free software or software like Microsoft Word. So I've got a template, and for these I just have the name, the dilution, and the initial or the first letter of the raw material. And this time I've got an A4 sheet of circular labels. So just like before, I go and print those labels with my normal regular printer, and then I simply take the circular labels and stick them on top of the bottles. These bottles which I've got are quite nice because the caps are quite wide, which means I can have quite a big circular label on top. I don't have clear labels for the top of these, but I found if any of these top labels do get damaged, I can always go and peel it off and just put on another one, which is pretty rare. Now, the reason for these top labels is they're really useful if you're looking at a load of raw materials top down and you want to quickly find one. And I find this is very useful if you've got your raw materials stored in drawers, like I know a lot of people have, or in boxes where you can't immediately see the side label of the raw material. So by having these labels on top, then you can quickly glance at the bottle and pick out what you need. Again, I like having the first letter because it helps me arrange my raw materials alphabetically, and if you're starting out, this isn't very important, but once you've got a collection of hundreds of raw materials, it does start to save you significant amounts of time by actually having your raw materials organized in an alphabetical order. Now, just before I finish, I will also mention that you can get something called a label printer, which is like a mini printer that you can have on your desk, which is especially designed for printing labels. The advantages of a label printer include the fact that it's often got its own template software, so if you don't already have software, this can be quite useful, and you don't necessarily have to waste a whole sheet. So in this case, I'm printing 9 pre-dilutions for different raw materials at a time, but say you only wanted to do 1 or 2, well, with a label printer, you can only print 1 and not waste a whole sheet of labels. You can just print 1 label at a time. And another thing is some of these label printers have rolls of labels with different materials. So I've seen that there are some where you can actually get plastic labels straight away. So instead of having to have a label and then put this extra protective layer on top, you could just print straight onto a plastic label, which is going to be naturally waterproof. So I am thinking about moving to one of these label printers in the future when I can afford one for my business, but I haven't done so yet, and this method which I've just shown you in the video has been working well for me for quite a few years now. So that's it. If you're interested in trying this for yourself and making your own custom labels, then hopefully this video has given you a little bit of inspiration. If you like this video, remember to like and subscribe, that way you'll get more videos like this coming up into your subscription feed, and thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. This video is sponsored by Luxeterra, my online store where you can find all of the essential equipment for perfumery. Only good quality and good value for money products make the cut, and I use almost all of the products myself when making perfumes for my brand. To browse the full range of products, visit www.lux-terra.co.uk or click the link in the description.